Good morning. Welcome to the Olympia.
Well, we seem to have lost Curtis. Okay. So let me continue the welcome to each of you to the Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation online worship service this morning. Our community comes together in the mutual promises and possibilities of our covenant, the promises that we make to each other. We commit to live out our mission to be a liberal religious community that opens minds, fills hearts, and transforms lives. We are so glad that you are here. I'm the Reverend Mary Geer, and I'm honored to be the minister for this congregation. Curtis Tanner is our celebrant this morning, and hopefully he'll be with us before too long. Also leading worship with us this morning is Troy Fisher, our music director. We give thanks to the amazing OUUC tech team for providing technical support today, and to Darlene Sarkala, our administrator, for keeping us informed and connected in all the ways that she does. We are grateful for the many hands that make worship happen this morning. We welcome each of you to this celebration of love and wonder, and to this congregation. After the service, we invite you to stay online for a virtual coffee hour. This is a chance to gather with a small group to say hello and check in. We'll offer more information at the end of the service about how that works. I draw your attention to the printed order of service. You've seen links to that. It also includes announcements, and there are announcements available on the website. Just a couple to point out. A reminder that we will gather online today at 2 p.m. to celebrate and honor the life of Billy Williams, a longtime member of OUUC. We expect family members from around the country and many from the community who knew Billy to be in attendance later today. We will gather in a different way, but we still gather when a loved one dies. Please plan to join together for this important ritual of remembering. And a huge shout out to the OUUC auction team. Woohoo! Yay! They were so dedicated and worked so hard on the annual auction this year, which was all online. The auction raised a net total of $33,793. Oh my goodness. Of that, $13,340 was for OUUC outreach. The outreach funds will be used for the technology that we need to bring our life-saving message to the larger community. And the rest will go toward the OUUC operating fund. Thank you so much to the team and to everyone who participated in the auction. I know that it was lively at my house last week. Your generosity is a testament to our commitment to bring love and justice into the world. There are many opportunities to stay connected to our community because social distancing doesn't have to mean social isolation. Please check the website regularly, and if you have questions or need help, please reach out to a staff member. Now let us open our hearts and minds as we prepare for worship. Welcome everyone. It is so good to be together. As we move into lighting the chalice, I'm just checking to see if Curtis is with us yet. All right. Then let's light our chalices together, shall we? This morning and every Sunday morning, we join Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world in lighting a chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition. This morning, we light our chalices together with these words from Tracy Bleakney. This chalice burns with twin flames. The first flame burns for those who seek and defend the right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, so that each person may live according to conscience in a democratically elected society. The second flame burns for the defenders of freedom, working against those who would impose their religious beliefs on others through intimidation or legislation. May we tend this fire always, ever vigilant and courageous in the struggle for freedom and justice for all. Our opening words this morning are adapted from Reverend Maureen Killeren's July 4th meditation. Spirit of life and love, I come longing for the simpler days that truly never were our lot, and I am an American. I am humanist and Christian, Muslim and Jew, pagan and atheist and Buddhist and you, and I am an American. I am one who fought for my country, and I am at the same time one who protested war, and I am an American. I am an owner of weapons, and I am one who would control our nation's guns by limiting the who's and what's and how's, and I am an American. As light is shown on our divisions, I live with often unacknowledged privilege, and I am moved to rage at the complexity of intersecting oppressions, and I am an American. In the challenge of our days, I am one who supports my country, and I am one who claims the tradition of dissent, and I am an American. In this polarized season, I am Democrat and I am Republican. I am libertarian and I am independent. I am green and I am confused, and I am an American. Spirit of hope, sit with us in our diversities. Help us hear one another in our divisions. Grant that beginning in this community, may we honor one another's truths and know that a just and faithful tomorrow begins here in our hearts. For with all our problems and all our pain, with all our limitations and mistakes, we are Americans. Come and let us worship together.
Let's sing together again. We're going to sing "We Are Building Up a New World." It's to the tune of Climbing Jacob's Ladder, and the words are found in the chat. Starts out with "We are building up a new world." We are building up a new world. We are building up a new world. We are building up a new world. Builders must be strong. Courage, people, don't be weary. 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 Though the road be long, rise and shine and sing of glory. Rise and shine and sing of glory.
Troy, we lost you for just a moment, so can we just check and make sure you're back?
I'm here.
Yay.
Okay.
Sing of glory for sure. All righty.
'Tis the morning, huh?
'Tis the morning, apparently. Thank you. So, the story that I have to offer you today is about Juliet Hampton Morgan. Juliet was born in 1914, and she was the only child of Frank and Lila Morgan, who lived in Montgomery, Alabama. Now, Juliet had white skin, and her family's wealth meant that she had access to all of the finest restaurants and galleries and movie theaters and art shows. And because of her skin color and privilege, it meant that throughout her life, she had other people who would clean her house and cook her food and do her laundry and tend her yard. Julia was a public school teacher, and then she was a librarian, and then she was the research director at the Montgomery Public Library. Those were the professions that were available to white women of means in those days. But there were some things that made Julia stand outside of the norm for those people that she called her friends in her community. For one thing, Julia held a Bible study in an interracial group where Black and white people studied the Bible together. And those groups met in Black churches because the white churches wouldn't allow that to happen. Another thing about Julia that set her apart is that she had anxiety attacks, panic attacks. And so because of those, she did not feel like it was safe to drive. And so she took the public bus system in Montgomery, Alabama. And riding the public buses meant that Julia saw how Black people were treated by the white bus drivers. She saw Black people who were called names. Their fares were thrown on the floor, and sometimes the white bus drivers would just drive right by people, leaving them in the rain. Now, one day, Julia was riding the bus, and she saw the bus come to a stop, and a Black person came on the bus and put their fare in the fare box. And then, as was required in those days and that time, this person stepped off the bus to go to the back door to enter so that they could go to the back of the bus. And while they did that, the bus driver drove away, leaving the person with no money and no ride. Well, Julia was so angry that she reached up and she pulled the emergency cord, causing the bus to stop. And she demanded that the bus driver let that person on. And after that, every time Julia was on the bus and she saw a Black person or anyone, but mostly Black people treated badly, she would pull the emergency cord. Well, after a while, the bus drivers caught on to what Julia was up to, and they started to taunt her and tease her, doing things to make her get so mad that she would stomp off the bus and walk to wherever she was going. Because of her experiences on the bus, in 1939, Julia started writing letters to the editor and all the papers in the area about the mistreatment and the racism that she saw. And she continued to write letters for almost 20 years. And during that time, the people of Montgomery, the white people of Montgomery, were so angry with her for calling out the racism. They demanded that she be fired from her job. They burned their library cards. It was a topic of conversation at the city council. And at one time, it was even so bad that people burned a cross, white people burned a cross on Julia's yard. After a while, it was just too much for Julia, and she withdrew from public life. Many years later, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King recognized Julia and her work in the 30s and 40s, calling out racism in the Montgomery bus system, because she set the stage for the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott that made the news. And in 2005, Julia Hampton Morgan was inducted into the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame, and the public library in Montgomery was named after her. Juliet's actions and words are more relevant today than they even were then. And this is something that she had to say. There are thousands who want to change our old order, but they are afraid of speaking out. I believe that is our problem, overcoming the fear of white people. As we celebrate this holiday weekend focused on freedom, may we hold the story of Juliet in our hearts. We came into community this morning, bringing all that is in our lives. In this space, we draw on the courage of community to hold all that we bring here today. We take the time now to share some of the joys and sorrows that have been offered. If you would like to send in a joy or sorrow this week, please look for the link on the online worship page on the OUUC website, and we'll bring it into the service next week. Right now, I invite us to take a breath together as we open our hearts to receive all that is in our community today. We hold and love and care today Carrie Kopnick, our interim community life coordinator, and her family. Carrie's mom, Donna Kopnick, died last Sunday afternoon, peacefully and cared for. Carrie was able to sing her mom a farewell over the phone, and we cherish the image of the love that Donna carried with her on the next leg of her journey. Carrie, we send love to you and your family. Celia and Gary Tobin ask for our thoughts and good wishes for healing. Gary remains medically fragile after a stay at St. Peter's Hospital for surgery to amputate one of his legs above the knee following an infection. Gary is now at a rehab center for further treatment with the hope that he will go home before too long. We send our love and healing prayers to Gary, Celia, and their family as they navigate this challenging time. I invite you to enter your sorrows in the chat box on your screen. We'll do the joys in the moment. Let's hold the sorrows first. And as we take in what is posted, let us reach out our hearts in love and care to all those who share. I place a stone in the water for all of the sorrows that are shared. And in the midst of it all, we look for moments of joy and a joy to share today. Amy Bertrand and Christmas Fram ask for our prayers and good thoughts for their mom, Sheila Fram, who fell and broke her hip last weekend following a hip replacement just a few days before. Sheila had surgery this week to repair the break and is recovering well in Tucson, Arizona. We send Amy, Christmas, Sheila, and their family our healing prayers and wishes for a speedy recovery. I invite you to enter your joys in the chat on your screen. As we take in what is posted, let us reach out our hearts in celebration to all those who share today. I place a stone in our water of community for all of the joys shared today. And one more stone placed in the water for all of the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken and that we hold in our hearts. I invite you now into a time of reflection, prayer, and meditation. Come into this place of quiet contemplation. Relax your body, even your breath. Focus your mind and bring your awareness into this moment, now. Infinite web of life, sweet spirit of love, help us connect to the power of compassion within us so that we may extend compassion to ourselves and each other. We extend our compassion to all those who suffer and to all who suffer injustice. From the deep well of compassion that joins us all, we extend our hands and hearts to embrace all that is. And as we hold in our awareness all that is, we acknowledge the diversity of our nation's people. May we embrace that diversity and relish the variety of experience and truth that it offers. We extend our compassion this day to those who work for justice, feeding the hungry, caring for the ill, educating children, sitting with those in pain, protesting injustice, singing a vision of what can be, the many ways that we join together to build a bridge connecting us all. As we extend our awareness to feel the presence of others, people, animals, trees, and flowers, Mother Earth herself, may we know that we are all connected. We are not alone. In this community of all beings, may we feel the spirit of life, and may we find hope. May we hold these truths in our hearts today and all days. May this be so. Blessed be, and amen. Let's hold a moment of silence together.
Let's sing together, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our prayers and meditations deepen our gratitude for what we know as sacred in our lives and in this world. Each Sunday, we express our gratitude by joining together in service to our community and to something greater than ourselves. The offering collected here will be used to support the continued good works of OUUC and shared with the local organization serving society's well-being, in harmony with our Unitarian Universalist principles. This month, our Share the Plate recipient is the Olympia School District Education Foundation Principals Emergency Fund. Congressman Denny Heck and other outstanding community members launched the Principals Emergency Fund in 2008 in response to the unmet basic needs of students and their families. In the 2018-19 school year, nearly 1/4 of Olympia School District students were living in poverty. Close to 300 students were homeless. The fund provides each school in the district with resources that allow principals and teachers to help remove common barriers and maximize students' potential. These funds have supported clothing, hearing aids, glasses, housing, transportation, food, school supplies, fees for school activities, and much more, transforming how students live and thrive. Please note that you can participate in the offering by making a donation online through the church website or by texting the number that will appear on your screen in just a moment. You can also mail a check to OUUC. Our community partners continue to need our financial support. May the offering now be generously given as it is gratefully received. Thank you for your generous gifts given freely. Our reading today is Dependence Day by John Daniel. It would be a quieter holiday, no fireworks or loud parades, no speeches, no salutes to any flag. A day of staying home instead of crowding away. A day we celebrate nothing gained in war, but what we are given, how the sun's warmth is democratic, touching everyone. And the rain is democratic too, how the strongest branches in the wind give themselves as they resist, and give themselves. How birds could have no freedom without the planet's weight to wing against. How Earth itself could come to be only when a whirling cloud of dust pledged allegiance as a world circling dependently around a star, and the stars blossomed into fire from the ash of other stars. And once, at the dark zero of our time, a blaze of revolutionary light exploded out of nowhere, out of nothing, because nothing needed the light, as the brilliance of the light itself needs nothing. This ends our reading.
"2020 has been quite a year." Whew, that's an understatement, isn't it? There have been so many things that have grabbed the headlines and dominated the US news. The novel coronavirus, the upcoming elections, the murders of Black and brown citizens, and calls for racial justice. And all the while, an important event has been happening this year, one that will impact the country for the next decade: the 2020 census. The census is a counting of all people in the country that is required by our Constitution. It was first done in 1790 and has been accomplished every 10 years since then, no matter what. The census is important not only for knowing who and how many people are in the US, it is used to determine how many representatives in Congress each state has, which determines the number of votes that each state gets in the Electoral College. Census numbers also determine a state's portion of federal funding for housing, education, transportation, and many other elements of the infrastructure and social safety net. The census numbers are important for representation, power, and money. If you haven't participated in the census yet, please reconsider its importance. You might recall that in 2018, the current administration proposed adding a question to the census about whether or not someone was a citizen. 18 states and many cities sued, claiming that asking about citizenship would suppress participation in the census and give a skewed count of who actually was in the country. Later in 2018, the Supreme Court ruled that the question was not allowed. The Constitution requires that all persons be counted. Who gets counted and how much they count for is not a new argument. In fact, it was one of the most contentious issues that the framers of the Constitution had to address when they gathered for the Constitutional Convention in that hot July of 1787. Knowing that congressional seats would be apportioned based on census numbers, the southern states of Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Virginia, the states that owned enslaved people, wanted to make sure that they maximized their number of seats in Congress, so they wanted enslaved people to be counted. Now, for context, at that time, there were more than 500,000 people of African descent in the colonies, and enslaved people accounted for as much as 40% of the population of some of the southern states. Let's be clear that there was no state that proposed that enslaved people be allowed to vote. It was simply a matter of whether or not they would be counted. The northern states didn't want those who were enslaved to be counted at all, which would maximize the power of the North. The southern states wanted enslaved people to be counted, which would maximize the power of the South. This argument was settled by what historians call the 3/5 compromise. The agreement was that 3 of every 5 enslaved people would be counted, giving slave-owning states more seats than if they had not been counted at all, and less than if enslaved and free people had been counted equally. This 3/5 compromise gave the slaveholder seats 1/3 more seats in Congress and 1/3 more votes in the Electoral College, and allowed them to dominate the new government until 1861, the Civil War. These are examples of how democratic practices like voting and the census have been and can be used to institutionalize racism. In these examples lies our history of counting or not counting Black and brown bodies in order to maintain white power and privilege. Our US Constitution begins with a phrase easily recognized: we the people. These arguments about who gets counted are about one fundamental question: who is we the people? Who are we? In our country's founding documents, the framers inscribed a vision of a government different than any they had ever known. From the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident: that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The white men of means who wrote this document set a moral standard of equality, freedom, justice, the common good, and happiness in life itself. Many of these writers, some of whom were Unitarians, also enslaved people. In their lofty vision for we the people, they did not include people kidnapped in Africa and brought to the colonies against their will or their descendants. They did not include the native people from whom they had stolen land. They did not include women. They did not include those without means. And that exclusion also extended to the right to vote. There was a huge discrepancy between the democracy that the founders envisioned and the reality that they lived. Theologian Parker Palmer calls this discrepancy between reality and vision the tragic gap. In his book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, Palmer explores the origins, intent, and foundation of democracy, calling us to return to a vision of what is possible if we hold tension in the difference, bridge the divide, and create community. Palmer's tragic gap is tragic not only because it is sad and heartbreaking, although it is certainly those. The gap is tragic in the literary sense, in the Shakespearean sense. It is tragic because the gap between reality and aspiration is an eternal and inescapable part of the human condition. No matter what progress we make toward our dreams, there is always more to be done. We never achieve perfection. There is always a gap. Being in that gap is difficult. There is disappointment and grief, heartbreak and disillusionment, rage and protest. There is a tension between what is and what could be. It is extremely difficult to live in that tension. And you might recognize that tension because we are there now. Lately, the vast chasm between the ideal of justice for all and the reality of a system built to support white supremacy has been laid bare for many to see. It has always been there. It is more visible and public now. Palmer says that to relieve that uncomfortable tension, we are usually pulled into one of two directions. Some of us see the reality of what is and fall into corrosive cynicism, an attitude that is mistrustful and pessimistic. I notice that in myself on days when I think, our politics are so divisive. How could anything possibly change? Why should I even bother? And others of us are pulled in the direction of the dream, and we fall into damaging idealism. We confuse the aspiration with the reality. We try to close the gap by making it disappear. I hear this in the words of those who say that white supremacy is what others do, and that we have made so much progress with racial justice. I hear this in the claims that a few small changes in policing will fix a systemic and pervasive problem. Those of us who are white ignored or minimized the voices in communities of color that told us that all was not well. We resisted awareness about how big and tragic the gap actually was. I had the privilege to protect myself, to ignore the gap, because I didn't want my heart broken by reality. Unaware of those who live in the gap because of the injustice that forces them there. In this time, we are offered daily reminders of how big that gap is and how much our hearts and lives are broken. So although cynicism and idealism are different, they do the same thing. They pull us out of the tragic gap. They remove us from the difference between reality and what is possible. They seem to relieve the tension that we feel, and they might even seem to repair our broken hearts, but it's a false sense of relief, one that continues to support separation, does not allow for growth or change, and causes the injustice to continue. Palmer invites us to acknowledge this gap between reality and aspiration, to live in the gap honestly and with an open heart, even if our hearts are broken. A broken heart can be shattered, or it can be broken open, ready to explore all that is within us in order to face reality and re-envision our dreams. With our hearts broken open, we can acknowledge the differences between us, differences in so many things, including perhaps our dreams. In the gap, we can take risks and practice failure. We can know imperfection and compassion. We can find and give blessings and grace. In the gap, we can envision a world where differences are valued, appreciated, and welcomed, where assimilation is not expected or seen as desirable, where we imagine the infinite web that joins us, differences and all. In this time, we, and by we I mean those of us who are Unitarian Universalists, we are being called to acknowledge a tragic gap in our denomination. We hold up our 7 principles as aspirations to who we can be, to what is possible, and yet the reality is different from our principles. Those of us who are white have been pulled into awareness these past few years as you people of color speak up again, telling us their experience of the gap between what we say we value and how we live. This too is part of our history. We are just like the founding fathers who were Unitarian, holding an ideal and not quite living up to it. In this time, we are being held accountable in the tragic gap and called to work toward bridging it. This is the third way, bridging the gap. This month of July, our spiritual theme is courage. Perhaps we can learn from the example of Juliet Hampton Morgan about what courage is like in the face of the tragic gap between freedom for all and racial injustice. She was courageous enough to cross color lines in the Times and worship with those who were different from herself. She was courageous enough to see the injustice right in front of her and call it to attention. She was courageous enough to take a public position demanding justice, even when it meant being shunned and threatened. Juliet did not demand justice alone. She had a community, even though it was small at the time. And there were many more to follow who followed her example. We are not alone in the tragic gap. It is there that we find community, and in community, I find hope. In that community, I experience that we are different, and I find others who share a vision of a world where difference is cultivated and valued. When I tend to despair, I am mindful of the interdependent web of all existence, and I remember that we, and by we, I mean the broadest we imaginable that includes all beings. We are in this together. As we celebrate this Independence Day weekend, may we hold on to the awareness of what is and a dream of what is possible. May we commit to the eternal work toward closing that gap together. And may we build a country in which we all have life, liberty, and can pursue happiness. All of us. May this indeed be so. Let us hold a moment of silence together.
Let's sing together hymn number 159, This Is My Song. This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
We extinguish our chalice with these words from Jim McGaw. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace, committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace.
Let's sing together our unison benediction.